through some of it, inshallah. So we will be skipping some parts of the book which are not really relevant to you guys. Sometimes what happens is when you do go through a lot of the book, and then the things you're supposed to remember, you forget them, and the ones you're not supposed to, like the nafil things, people end up remembering them, and the farz ones they keep forgetting. So we cover the key parts in the fiqh part. Focus more on those things which are fard, wajib, sunnah, muqtada, and any extra things we'll skip over them, inshallah. So inshallah, if you turn to page number 37. So the first part of the book is based on Aqidah. So we'll start with page number 37, inshallah. Bismillah. So here he's talking about the matters of faith. What is faith? What is or topics that are linked to Iman and faith. So he's already discussed about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what we should believe about the Sahaba Ikram, what we should believe about prophets. And now inshallah he's starting ready to touch on a few things about faith. And first he mentioned about the faith in general. So he's talking about in general, so he mentioned about faith, you have a balance in your deen. So deen is about having a balance and not being going to ifrat or tafreed, too excessive in something or too slack in something as well. Sometimes people go overboard with one thing and then they overdo it, or they be extreme in one view. Either they're too relaxed about the deen and they take it for granted and they don't do amal, or they are too excessive or too extreme, like we have people saying this is bid'ah, this is shirk, put fatwas on everyone, this is kufr, this is haram, going around like this. But our understanding of the deen is that it's like a middle path. It's neither of the two extremes. So it mentions your faith itself does not increase or decrease. Thus the increase of faith mentioned in the Quran Kareem refers to the increase in its fruits. So here is mentioned that when you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no such thing that he's trying to allude to, that either you're going to believe 5% or 10%. Either you believe in Allah or you don't believe in Allah. And he said that when mentioned in the Quran Kareem that Iman can increase or decrease, it's about the fruitness and the beauty of and the sweetness of that Iman. You know, some people pray the salah and they feel a different buzz and connection. Some people just pray the salah and they're thinking about what's going to eat for roti at home. Right? So it's about what kind of spiritual level you're on, but there's either you believe or you don't believe. So there's no middle ground that you half believe or your belief will increase and decrease. That's what he's referring to here. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers this in the Quran Kareem, it refers to that the beauty and the sweetness of the Iman, the nur of the Iman increasing and decreasing in our hearts. Then it is not permissible to describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the ability to oppress, be foolish, lie. So here the author is reminding us that any attribute of defect, any negative thing, it can't be attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from all things which are negative, and in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they consider impossibilities. So the impossibility for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to lie. For example, we have a group of Muslims that claim that it's possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to lie, but He chooses not to lie. See, and so this is called the Aqidah Imkan Kadhib, the possibility to lie. This is not the stance of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, but you will get some groups that claim to be Sunnis, and then they will hold this opinion that it's possible for Allah to lie, but He doesn't lie. But this is not the stance of the true Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And generally, you know, impossibilities, they don't come out under divine power. You know, we say, Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. Allah has the power to do everything. But things which are impossibilities, they don't come under divine qudra, divine power. Like an impossibility would be something to be moving and still at the same time. Either it's going to be moving or it's going to be still. It can't be that both things are happening in one go. Right? So when someone is saying, can Allah do that? You won't answer the question by saying, yes He can or no He can't. You'll say, that's an impossibility. Impossibilities can't happen in the first place. So it's foolish, the question is foolish in the first place. So if you to say Allah can't do that, then that would kind of give like a negative connotation, a negative understanding that Allah doesn't have the ability to do that. Right? But rather the question you say is wrong. Because it's something which is impossible. So impossibilities can't come under the divine power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A similar thing would be like, in the asking schools, and they try to fool you, and this is where they try to trick you through subjects and they try to take your iman away. Can Allah make a rock that He can't pick up himself? And then a person will be trying to think, yes, He can make a big rock. Then at the same time he's getting confused. But how can He not pick you up? So He's the all-powerful. So it's either way your answer is wrong, because the question is wrong. Because if you make something that you can't pick up, what are you saying? I'm making myself weak. Right? Because if I can't pick you up, I'm weak, aren't I? So in reality the question is saying, can Allah make a rock that He can't lift? I.e., can Allah make Himself weak? You'll say this is an impossibility. The question logically doesn't make sense. So you won't answer these kind of questions. But these kind of questions, they're addressed and put forward to youngsters in schools through RE subjects. Or like just, this was a group of people believe, what do you understand from this statement? Really they're having a dig at you. Really they're trying to, tackle your iman and test your faith with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to put it in a question form in your RE classes, so this is how we need to be stay alert in subjects as well, in school as well. Then he mentions that it's not possible for him to break his promise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, any promise He has made in the Quran Kareem, He won't go against His word. So if the disbelievers have been promised in the Quran, they're going to get adhab, they're going to get adhab. If people have been told and something has come under a threat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not that Allah's promised that, for example, for Muslims, Allah has told us that people will be punished for this sin, that sin, that sin. But those are like a threat from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If He wants, He can forgive those threats. On Yawm al-Qiyamah, He could say, because you've done this one good action, I'll forgive all your guna. But then you might be thinking that Allah said, there's this punishment for this bad action, there's this punishment. Yes, He's warning us, He's giving us a threat in a way. But at the same time, out of His mercy, He can forgive the believers. But those promises that He's given, those promises will stay. I.e., the promises of disbelievers going to hell. There's no such thing that Allah will say to the kafirs at Yawm al-Qiyamah, out of my mercy, I forgive you. Even though we believe He's the most merciful. But certain things will stay as they are because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He has promised such. So it's important to keep that in mind. Another thing is mentioned here that this, sometimes this is something also pumped us into our minds in this Western world as well as through social media, is when we are made to believe that we deserve something. Like if you watch, the attitude of people growing up in the West, they think they deserve, that we deserve this kind of a standard of education. We deserve to be treated like this. We deserve to have this amount of wealth. We deserve, because of we are X, Y, Z. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us as He pleases. There's no such thing that Allah is forced to do because we deserve something or we want something. If He wants you to have something, He'll give it to you. If He doesn't want, He won't give it to you. There's no force and compulsion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's not forced to do anything. It's not compulsory for Him to give us. If He wants to give you, He's giving you out of His mercy. If He's taking it away from you, then He's also taking it out of His mercy as well. Alright, so this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His own choice. There's no obligation for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do that which is best or good for us as the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is not possible according to us for Him to place on a servant a burden greater than he can bear. So it's not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah won't burden you in your life with something that you can't handle. Every single situation that you're put in, you're designed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to deal with that. When people say, commit suicide, I can't put up with life. Maybe they got dumped by someone, they're going through a divorce, they've lost their parents, whatever it is, and they get emotional and they take their own life. They've been bullied at school, then they take their life. These things are realities, they do happen. And most of these things happen is because people don't get support from other people. And then shaitan makes them feel as if they're not ready to handle that issue. They're not ready to handle that problem. If you look at the facts and the stats of suicide, for example, there are more men who commit suicide than women. And this is a fact. Why? Because women, when they have an issue, they just go let it out. They'll tell their mom, they'll tell their sister, they'll tell someone, they'll tell their husband. But as men, we feel this natural pride that if I tell is my bestie, imagine I'm getting bullied at school, and if I go, I'll think to myself, if I tell my friend Ali that I'm getting bullied, he's gonna think he's chicken, stand your ground. So I'm gonna feel embarrassed with my friends. If I tell my brother's gonna think I'm a wuss. If my parents find out and say you're doing my bestie, this is how men naturally feel, right? So then, even though they can deal with that issue, all they need to do is tell someone, and then they'll tell them how to deal with it. But because they try to hold it to themselves now, because they're not getting support from their parents, they're not getting support from the person who can help them in that situation, what happens? Then the shaitan. That's where the shaitan comes in. And then he says to you, oh, your life's this, your life's that, you can't do it. And then even grown men who outwardly you think they're big, rough and tough, because of that emotional breakdown, they end up committing suicide. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as believers, this is our iman. Allah will never ever put us in a situation that we can't handle. If like for example, every single person has a different level of ability or how much they can bear. One person, he might be fully broken after losing just say someone's mother passes away. He might be fully distraught. But that's the only level he can bear. Another person who's lost his father, lost his mother, lost his sister, lost his child, and he's lost 4 or 5 people. Because that's the level that he could bear. That's the level that he could handle. So he'll be pushed to his limits, you could say. And you will have that experience in life. Whereas one person might be thinking that I just lost my parents and I couldn't handle it. Look at this guy, he's lost 4 or 5 people. Because he's designed different from you. But Allah's only going to push you to the limit that you're designed to handle. So whenever any difficulty comes your way, then know that it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as Muslims, we're ready to put up with that challenge. The next is, it says, the faith of a blind follower is valid. In Iman, and like in the Hanafi school, and we follow Imam Abu Hanifa in fiqh. And the ulama mentioned that it's wajib, it is necessary for us to follow one of the 4 Imams. Either Shafi, Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad, and Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahumullah. One of the 4 Imams. But when it comes to belief, the ulama mentioned that you can't believe because so-and-so said. Like for example, I believe in namaz is farz. I believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is my Lord. Why do you believe it? Why do you believe Allah is your Lord? Because Imam Ghazali wrote his book. No. It has to be your own conviction. Right? So certain things you can't believe because so-and-so said. So the rules of fiqh normally about the detail, how much, what things will break the wudu, which type of bleeding won't break the wudu, which type of, there's detail, they require research, right? But believing in Allah, believing in the angels, believing in Yawm al-Qiyamah, these are personal things that everyone should believe, because why? It says in the book of Allah. It says, I believe it from my heart, not because X, Y, and Z said, because I personally believe that. Because it says in the Quran Kareem, I believe namaz is follow. Now the details of a namaz, you can say, I follow Imam Abu Hanifa because he's done the research, he showed us. But if you say, I believe in namaz is follow because Imam Abu Hanifa wrote in his book, or Imam so-and-so wrote in his books, then that's incorrect. So the main core belief, especially in Iman and in our beliefs, there is no following other people. We should stick to the Quran and follow the Quran Kareem, and follow because it says in the Quran Kareem. But someone might be illiterate. That's what I'm referring to here. That someone might believe because the forefathers have told them and they grew up like that. And they never really questioned it. But in their mind, they can just, when they think about it, there must be a God. So how did this world exist? They don't know Quran evidence, they don't know Hadith evidence. That's what I'm talking about. They grew up in a household, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, and they were just convinced. They didn't do no research. We have other elders, for example, who never studied before. They never read Quran in some villages in Pakistan, some places around the world. They've never studied formally. But they just believe because they're born in a Muslim household and it's word of mouth. Some places, like for example in Mauritania, some people have never seen a Quran before. They've never come across a copy of the Quran. There's some people are Hafiz of Quran without seeing the Quran. So this is one of the miracles of our deen. But you should have conviction from your heart. Iqrarun bil lisan, tasdeequn bil qalb. That's what Iman is when you firmly believe from your heart. So he said if one repents from, now you're talking about sins. He said if one repents from a major sin, his repentance is valid, except even if he persists on another major sin. So imagine someone has done two major sins. One is, for example, he drinks alcohol, and the other one might be he does zina. Now, he's done tawbah from zina. He said, you know what, I'm never going to do that again. He can do sincere tawbah from zina and still be alcoholic. Yeah, it doesn't mean that he has to, his tawbah to be accepted, that he has to do tawbah from every single sin. Each sin will be dealt with individually. So if someone disrespects their parents, for example, that's a major sin. Now, if he does tawbah that I'm never going to disrespect my parents again, he's made sincere tawbah, he could be forgiven on that one thing. But he might have another major sin that he still does, like misses his namaz. That be judged separately. So every action will be dealt with separately in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we should all make an intention to do tawbah from all our sins. And the last point that he mentioned, you can finish this part off on today, is if you make tawbah from a major sin, it doesn't mean your minor sins are also forgiven. There's different things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in place that help us to, wipe our sins away. For example, we spoke about in previous lessons, when you do wudu, your minor sins are washed away. When you do any good action, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wipes your sins away. That is referring to minor sins. Major sins, they require tawbah. So you can't say that, I'll do so-and-so good thing and then my sins are gone. Like, for example, someone done a minor sin, he done wudu with the intention that what mistake I made, or Allah take the mistake away, he's doing wudu. That sin could be wiped out just by doing wudu. Did he true nafal, that sin could be wiped out. But now he's done a major sin, and he thinks I'll just go do wudu, do true nafal, and just by doing a good action, Allah will wipe that major sin away. No. Major sin require that we do tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness. So inshallah that part is finished. The next lesson we'll start on this chapter of the divine names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. That's where the next lesson starts on this, in the Aqidah part. Inshallah, if you turn to page number 64. Does anyone have any questions?
What's the difference of making tawbah for minor sin or major sin?
Like major sin and tawbah is tawbah generally, right? So you do the same principle, same, but some things, because they're not that severe, if you done wudu like mentions, or you done some good action, Allah gives you reward and removes your sins. So that'll be like a minor sin. But general conditions of tawbah, Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions, if the guna is between you and Allah, it have three conditions. And if the guna is between you, Allah, and a third person, then it will have four conditions. The first, if it's between you and Allah, for example, you missed your namaz. First, you make the intention to never do that guna again. Second is you're sad about what you did. You know, like people be like, tawbah, 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 and they're laughing. I'm just touching the ears, that's not tawbah. Right? So first, you make the intention, I'm never going to do that thing again. I'm never going to miss a namaz. Second, you're sad, you know what, I should have, scheduled my time properly, but I didn't miss my namaz. And the third, that you actually stay away from that guna, whatever that sin is. So, one is making the intention, and one is actually staying away from it. Because it might be that you think that, I'm going to stay away from zina, or I'm going to stay away from drinking alcohol. But you might not get a chance in your whole life, you might not even come across alcohol again. So just because you never came across alcohol, it didn't mean that you saw tawbah from Allah. So the intention of not doing that thing has to be there as well. It's not just staying away, because you might not get the opportunity to do that guna. Right? So you might be in a scenario that, for example, you were in a scenario that you're vulnerable to do zina, for example. And now then you committed the guna, you've done the guna. In the rest of your life, you might not be in a situation that you could do zina. Imagine you got locked up, you're only one person in the cell. So it doesn't mean that guna is forgiven because you've never done it. Your intention of tawbah should be, even if I have the opportunity, I'm never going to do that guna. Right? So that's between you and Allah. So first, intention, I'm never going to do it again. Second, you actually stay away from the guna. And third, you sad about the guna, what you've done. If it's including another person, then you give the right back to that person. So if you backbite from someone, then you seek forgiveness from that person. If you stole someone's wealth, you return the wealth to that person. Just giving that thing back to them, automatically then you tawbah them. Like, for example, I stole your mobile phone, I took it home. And now, I felt guilty in the night. In the morning, I came and gave you a phone. I took your phone, I gave it back. You said, I'm never going to forgive you. Really, you can't, there's nothing to forgive because I gave the phone back. Now it's only me and Allah left because I've replaced it. So if I took your £10, I gave you back in the morning, you're like, I'm never going to forgive what you did to me. How dare you steal the £10? Really, there's nothing you got against me now because I gave you £10 back. It's only between you and Allah now. Yeah, so that's the full general tawbah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for whatever guna you have done. So the minor one, so like a minor sin can't be forgiven. Obviously we do these things, minor sin is gone. But a major sin won't be forgiven if you've done wudu or something. You need to do these 3 things or 4 things for a major sin.
What if you repeatedly doing major sins?
The same one.
Yeah, let's say all these major sins are addiction, isn't it?
Alright, so like for example, that's what I'm saying. So if a person did 2 different ones, you do tawbah for one of them, that could be forgiven, but now you still need to do tawbah for the other one.
What if you keep going back?
But if you do that thing again, the ulama mentioned that, like for example, someone drank alcohol on Monday, he did tawbah in the night. Tuesday he drank again, he did tawbah in the night. It's as if the ulama mentioned that if you keep going back to it, it's as if you never really done the tawbah. Because if you actually done it, you won't go back to it. And if you do go back to it, consider that your tawbah wasn't accepted because you never done a proper tawbah. That's one of the signs that your tawbah is not accepted, is that you keep doing that guna again. So Monday you done something wrong, you done tawbah in the night, Tuesday you done it again. Right? It could be like, people are vulnerable to watching haram, for example. You watch something haram, and then you say, Astaghfirullah, I'm never going to do this again, you do tawbah. And then next day you watch it again. And then you do tawbah, and then next day you watch it again, a week later you watch it again. It's because you've never really done it from your heart. If you're really guilty and sad about that tawbah, then you won't do it again. The next time it comes to your mind, you'll be like, no, I've done tawbah, astaghfirullah, I can't do that, and I'm going to stay away. And that's a sign of your tawbah being accepted. But if you keep doing it after that, then you need to do tawbah properly.
Is that the same? Let's just say, for example, smoking, that's a major sin in it, like, or drinking, innit?
Like,
Like once, and obviously you grade everything, then it happens that 4 years later, 3 years later.
Yeah, so then
That's
that'll
proof
be
that you did it actually came from the heart, because you didn't live for a long time.
yeah, so that'll be basically now you have to do fresh tawbah again.
It's about, would you be truly forgiven for that first?
Like generally we're told that if you do this, guna is forgiven. There's no guarantee. If you did namaz, what's the guarantee namaz is accepted? You just still have to do it. Right? So there's no guarantee that our namaz is accepted, no guarantee our zakat is accepted, whatever good you've done. Only on the day of judgment, out of Allah's mercy. The guy, we're looking at him, or look at him standing in namaz, he can't read namaz. On the day of judgment, you might see him going to Jannah, you'll be like, this guy didn't read namaz properly. But because he was present fully in his namaz, while you were busy in your namaz, look at him. Right? So it depends on who you are and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ultimately, the bottom line is, and this we've covered this already, the bottom line is, on the day of judgment, it's the mercy of Allah that counts. If He wants to forgive you, all your life you done guna. If He wants to live, Bismillah, go to Jannah. Yeah, Allah said, enter Jannah. Udkhuluha bisalam. Yeah, enter Jannah, enjoy it. Whereas on the other hand, all your life you did namaz, whatever you did, one bad thing you did, Allah said, you know what, put this guy into hell. That's the mercy of Allah. That's the justice and fairness of Allah. If He wants to, He can do that. So we just ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to shower us with His mercy. Right? Along with tawbah, if you read in namaz, even if you don't do major sins, still ask Allah for the mercy that He enters you to Jannah. And because that will ultimately be based on the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not our actions. So inshallah, moving on page 64 about the topic of wells. So last lesson we mentioned, we spoke about, and I sent you, some of you guys, if you're in a Friday group, I did send you major filth and like a table for, I made a table for you guys, I did post it in the group. I don't think you're in the group, I'll send you separately. It's just a breakdown, which things are considered major filth or minor filth. And then you can just look at the overview of the last few lessons. And now here he mentioned about the wells. I know we don't have wells in the UK, but there's different things that we have are similar to this. It could be, for example, you have a bucket of water that you're going to do wudu with. It could be, you have the old system at home in your house. The elders would know, a few years back there used to be those big, like a boiler, like a tanky in the house, where the water would go through and then it would be warmed up. It wasn't like the actual boiler that we have now, which the water goes through one side, gets warm, comes out the other side. It would be a big massive tank that would be warmed up. So these kind of things still do exist. Or imagine you've got a swimming pool, you might be rich, you might have a swimming pool at home, and then you might find yourself in this situation. And generally, this will apply in Pakistan. Most people who live in the village, you still use wells, water from the well. So these things are really important for purification. So they say a small well of water becomes impure if filth falls into it, such as urine, blood, so heavy filth. When heavy filth falls into a small pond of water, a small amount, then that small amount of water becomes impure. Even if you can't see any signs of the blood or the major impurity inside it. The same ruling applies for a large amount of dung. There's mentioned here, like, of camel dung, donkeys, cattle, or anything like that. Because those of you who know where the wells are, normally they're in a ground, a village, where there's cows walking around, or these loose animals, cattle walking around. So it's possible that their feces basically could go inside the well. Because that's a possibility and very possible, the ulama, they mentioned that a certain amount of cow or animal dung is excused. Whereas something that naturally won't be found in a well, like blood, Someone purposely has to go put the blood inside the well. Urine, someone purposely has to go urinate inside the well. Whereas for the droppings of a bird, for example, they just naturally happen because birds fly over the well and they could. And so it mentions here that some things are excused. So a certain amount of camel dung, if it goes inside, or donkey or cattle, it will be excused. Then he mentions some things that don't make the water impure if they go inside well water. One would be pigeon and sparrow. And in the table that I've sent you, pigeon droppings are not considered filth or impure. Right? So if a bird or like a pigeon was to poop on you, then your clothes won't be in that bark. You just clean that off and leave a mark and be a bit dirty. There's a difference between dirt and filth in Islam. Like you're playing football in the park, all your trousers have mud on them. That's called being dirty, being messy. That's not called being filthy. Right? Filth is something in najasat, impurities. Whereas being messy, like for example, you have roti and you have salad over your clothes, that won't be filth, that'll be mess. That'll be being dirty away in terms of your appearance. So another thing they mention here is any dead creatures that die inside that don't have flowing blood in them. So you had a bucket of water, for example, and a mosquito died in there. A fly died in the water. Can you still do wudu from that? Yes, you can. Okay, so these things are small. Or if you had some water and someone put a fish inside the water and the fish died, is the water still pure? Yes, it is. As long as that animal, that sea creature that has died in the water was born in water and lived in water, like fish, frogs, for example. They are born in water, they live in water. So that if they die in water, the water is still clean. But if something that is not born in the water and it comes from outside and enters the water, then that has a different rule. But something that lives inside water, dies inside the water, your water is still considered pure and clean. You can still use that water. Another thing they mention here, there is an animal that falls inside the water, but it comes out alive. There's a difference between like for example, you had a pond or something you're gonna do wudu with, and then your cat jumped inside it, then the cat jumped back out. As long as the animal comes back out alive and it didn't have physical filth on there, like obviously like urine or poo, then that wouldn't make the water impure. But as if the animal comes out alive and is clean, it didn't have physical filth on there that you could see, the water is still clean. Okay, so that's one thing to keep in mind. Apart from one thing they mentioned is a pig. In every aspect, a pig is impure, so you have to remove the water. The water is considered filthy now. The next thing, do like a breakdown if some animal dies inside the water, which I'll make summarize. So if you got well, if a mouse dies in there, obviously you take the mouse out first, then you take the 20 buckets of water out. If a medium-sized animal dies in there, which would be like a rabbit or they mentioned a pigeon or something, then you take the animal out and then you take 40 buckets out. And if it's a large animal that dies in it, then you take the animal out and you remove all the water off the well. That's the three categories. So a small animal, 20 buckets, which is like a mouse. Medium size, like a pigeon, would be 40 buckets. And large animal would be the whole well. You have to empty all the water out. And then the next water that comes in, that's considered pure inside the well. But if any of these animals swell up, sometimes if an animal dies in the water, what happens? It gets swollen and it goes like that, right? Then all the water needs to be removed. Even if it's a mouse in there, all the water needs to be removed. Or another thing that can happen is the animal could basically kind of break down and kind of go into pieces. It might be in there a few days. If it breaks down, then all the water needs to come out as well. So this is something to keep in mind. Generally, if you regularly go to Pakistan and you live in the ground, the village. The next topic that we touch upon is the saliva. So So that's the well one is briefly done, covered. The next one is saliva of different animals have different outcomes, because you could have, for example, a cat that is licking your hand. You could have a dog that's licking your hand. You could have, any cattle that you're feeding, any cow or horse that you have that you're feeding, and you might have licked your hand. You might have gone to the zoo with your family, and you watch this video when the giraffe puts its head inside the car and you start screaming, right? People try to be heroes, try to feed the animals, which you should have. But generally, you don't know what kind of scenario you're going to find yourself in. So he says the saliva has 4 categories it goes in with regards to the ruling of water that's mixed with it. First, it's pure and it can still purify. So you have pure water and now a bit of saliva has got mixed with it. The water is still stay pure and it can still do wuzu with it. That's the first category. And that will be the saliva of human beings, even if a kafir. Sometimes in our culture what happens is a kafir and a jutani pina, right? You can't have the leftover of a kafir. That's not true. As long as they haven't had anything haram food which will be on their mouth, as long as they haven't drank sharab or whatever it is, like alcohol, naturally every human is considered pure and clean. So if a non-Muslim drank from a bottle of water and you picked it up and afterwards and drank from the same water, in Islam it's pure and it's purifying. Or imagine that was the only water you had for wudu and a non-Muslim picked it up and he drank some water. Obviously it touched his lips when he put the bottle down. The one that's when he sealed his lips, it touched his mouth and he went back inside. So he mixed with a bit of his saliva, it's gone back inside the water. So now can you do wudu with that? Yes, you can. So the leftover water of a Muslim, of a human being is considered pure, kafir or a Muslim. Even if the person had to do ghusl, right? Even in major state of impurity, he had to do ghusl. Ghusl was farz on him, and still it's fine. The water is still pure. You can do wuzu with that. That's the first category. Second, and they also include in the same categories animals whose meat is halal to eat. So imagine he had some water and a sheep came and he drank from that water. Now you can't say, oh, animal drank from the water, I can't do wudu. It's still pure and clean. You can still purify within yourself. That's the first category. Second category is when the water becomes impure. Now it mentions here that the water may not be used for purification in any case, nor may be drunk except with one in dying need, just as he may eat meat of any animal not ritually slaughtered. This category includes saliva of dogs, pigs, and predatory land animals such as lions, wolves, hyenas, apes, and the like. So the second one is any predatory animal, if he eats or drinks from any water, the water becomes impure. That's first thing. Also, the mention here is that not only that you can't do wudu with it, you can't drink that water as well. And they mention one scenario that if it's life and death, you can eat. Same way, you can even eat a pig if you're going to die. But only to the level that you're going to stay alive. So for example, there's some alcohol there, or there's some pork there, and you're about to die, and you have a bite of the pork, that'll keep you going for the rest of the day, for example. That's the only level is halal, or permissible for you at that time. If you take one bite and it's alright, and then you just munch the whole pork sandwich, whatever it is, right? Then any extra you take is haram. One is enough, or 2 bites. Imagine one bite might be enough to, and you know that, okay, I can survive with this. Inshallah, I'll find something else. That one bite is what's only allowed for you. If you think it's 2 bites that are going to keep you alive, then you take the 2 bites. But if any extra you take will be haram for you, right? But generally these things would be haram and impure as well.
Well, do you have to eat the pork and just die? But I'll be honest, I'd rather die than eat pork.
Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is right. He doesn't, like I mentioned in the previous part, Allah not burdening you with anything. Out of taqwa, that's One, it depends like who you are. Imagine there's a person who's extremely pious. He doesn't do anything wrong. And then he's in that situation, but he thinks, you know what, I don't want any haram to be in me. I want to go to Allah in a pure state. Now, because of his high, one is fatwa, right? In everything, most things, one is fatwa, one is taqwa. There's two things to keep in mind. Like for example, they say fatwa is you're allowed to do this, it's permissible to do this, it's permissible to do this. That's what people use these days, right? But one is taqwa, your consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You being in the court of Allah, how you see yourself. So if you're spiritually, you feel that I can't do this, and you're on the spiritual level, then those people will say, you know what, I still don't want to eat haram. No matter what, Allah said is haram. I'm not taking the leeway. Right? Like for example, the ulama say that buying one house is allowed in the UK. Right? They say that if X, Y, and Z circumstances, and out of majburi, you're allowed to buy one house on mortgage or whatever, right? That's a fatwa given by ulama. If you really want to follow the taqwa, the real command, you don't do any interest no matter what. So even though the ulama have said in X, Y, and Z scenario, certain people with certain majburis and difficulties and challenges, they can get a mortgage. That'll be a fatwa for ulama, and they say for that person. But your taqwa would be that I'm not gonna do it. Why? Because Allah said interest, stay away from me, I'm gonna stay away from you. Similarly, for example, we have people, chicken from the butchers. The fatwa is that if the guy in the shop says it's halal, it's halal. Taqwa would be not to eat it. Right? Because most people who know about the chickens and stuff like that, or slaughtering, you know that it's impossible to do all this zabah. All the chicken that's consumed in the UK, it's impossible to hand zabah that every day. Most of this is, or a lot of it, you could say, is done on machines or chemically done, and it's a lot is even haram. But because you get mixed with the halal and the haram, the people start, shopkeepers do fraud and they buy the cheap one. We have non-Muslim, for example, people who own farms. They say we have Muslim guys who own shops and takeaways. They come buy a dead chicken. No zabah, nothing, just died. We just say, why? Because they give that for 50p, 25p a chicken. So Muslim shops are taking these. But the fatwa would be for the public, why is it? It's allowed, you're allowed to eat it. If the shopkeeper says it's halal, it's halal for you. If the butcher says it's halal, it's halal. But then you have ulama and some other people, they say no. We know this dodgy stuff that's been sold. And we know, like for example, there was a scandal or this thing going on in Luton, and I think it happened a few years back where a lot of shops were selling haram chicken, and it came on, there's a documentary made, you can still find it on YouTube. There's a documentary that this company they were selling halal, but it was actually haram, and they got exposed and they got caught. And a lot of, I'm not sure it was Luton, that a lot of shops were actually selling haram chicken. But because the guy telling it's halal for you. But that's why the ulama go with fatwa, and that will be in your case as well, in the question you asked. If someone, after taqwa of Allah, they say, I'm still not going towards haram. Allah said it's haram, filthy, pig is filthy, it's filthy for me. But the fatwa would ulama still say it's permissible for you to have a certain amount to stay alive. And that's why the ulama will advise you, they won't advise you to kill yourself basically. Because that's what Allah doesn't want. And the third, it mentions, so the first one is pure, left over of a Muslim, left over of a halal animal. Second was of haram animals or predatory animals, which are like pigs, dogs, their saliva is impure. Third is disliked. This includes the saliva of house cats, released chickens, free range chickens. Not free range that we have in our shops, they're not really free range. This is all a scam as well. When you go to Tesco and it says free range chicken, it's not really free range. There's two different ways that they do it. One is they have them fully caged up and they give them a certain food and they call it caged hens and they sell that the cheapest. And then they have a massive warehouse, just say like 20 of this mosque size, right? And they'll have 100,000 chickens on there. So many chickens, watch some documentaries, it's good to watch them to know what you're eating. Because you know the saying in English, you are what you eat. That is a reality. Because that, what we consume and eat, that has an effect on our character, who we are. It kills our spirituality as well. That's one of the reasons why the ulama, and a lot of them who focus on spirituality and tasawwuf, they don't eat these normal chickens. They get proper zabar done themselves. Right? So this is about spirituality as well. It's not just about taking the fatwa, it's about your spiritual journey with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. So he mentions here released chickens, that actually means free range, proper organic chickens, and not the ones that there's like a million of them in a room sitting on top of each other and they call it free range because they're allowed to move around in this farm or in this room, but that's not really free range. Then he mentions here that the fourth one is the saliva in which there is doubt regarding its purifying nature. This is the saliva of mules and donkeys. If no other water is available, one makes wudu with this water, followed by tayammum, and they praise his salah. So like for example, you had water for donkey, that's doubtful. Right? That's doubtful. So the ulama say you still do wudu with it, but then you do tayammum just in case, and then you perform your salah with this type of water. And inshallah for this we will leave it here, and then we'll do a few minutes on the last part inshallah, and then you're free to go inshallah. We're skipping page number 36. I know is that the page you want? We're skipping that one. It's straightforward. It's about ghusl, and which I told you about in the fiqh part. So Imam Ghazali just touches on that. Next part which I want to touch on is page 38. At the bottom of page 38, the etiquette of setting out for the mosque. So now Imam Ghazali is building up in this book. Is that the book you have, Shahid? This one? Yes. Page number 38. Yeah, so here is mentioned that. So Imam Ghazali is giving you the routine of your day. So far he mentioned waking up in the morning, going to the toilet, and doing ghusl, how to do wudu, the adab of doing wudu, the du'as that you should read for spirituality and stuff like that. Now he's mentioning that when you set out for namaz in the morning. So here he says, when you have finished your purification, pray 2 sunnah rakats of fajr in your house if dawn has broken. This is what the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ is and what he used to do. So the sunnah is when you wake up in the morning, you read your 2 sunnahs of Salatul-Fajr at home. Right? So that you get more reward. And I know it's become a trend when people read in the masjid. But if you actually want to follow the actual sunnah, is to read your 2 sunnahs at home. And then go to the masjid and then you pray your fard with the jamaat. That's the first thing he mentions. Then he says, they make your way to the mosque. Do not fail to pray with the jamaat, especially the morning prayer. In another narration, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, the person who reads Isha namaz with jamaat and reads Fajr namaz with jamaat, he gets the reward of reading, praying all night long. That's the reward of a person who reads Fajr namaz and Isha namaz with jamaat, is as if he prayed, and he gets the reward of praying, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all night. So here he mentioned that when you pray your namaz with jamaat, your reward increases 27 times. And there's loads of other benefits praying with your salah with jamaat. But here he's mentioned one of the key things I mentioned in the hadith, that the person who prays in namaz with jamaat, his reward is increased 27 times. And then he says, do not fail to pray your salah in congregation, especially the morning prayer. A prayer in congregation is 27 more times better than a prayer alone. If you are negligent of such a profitable act, then what benefit is there for you to pursue the knowledge after all the fruit of knowledge is acted upon it? So he's mentioning here something very important, which most people, even students of knowledge, and even people who have done alim courses and so on, it's easy to study deen. And we have a lot of people practicing and showing fatwas online. Even, like for example, in this, I'm just talking about generally in this community, I have so many people's numbers that live on these roads, and they be putting videos up of themselves or quotes about themselves because they've studied a certain amount of deen and they give fatwas online. But they don't read namaz with Jamaat. As a student of knowledge, your duty is to read namaz with Jamaat. At least if you're a student. For a general person, you can say he's got excuses. He's just about paying his namaz. At least he's paying his salah at home. But a person who's studying the deen, studying Islam, then he should be definitely reading namaz with Jamaat. And this is a sign of a student of knowledge. So Imam Ghazali is saying, what faida, what benefit is to you studying all these books of Quran and Hadith and trying to be so pious and because you know so much information. But when it comes to acting upon that knowledge, you don't act upon it. So he says, if you're studying the deen, then act upon it. And the best way to act upon is at least reading namaz with Jamaat. And if the ulama mentioned that if there's two people at home, for example, you have a father and son, you came back from somewhere, you missed namaz with Jamaat. For example, Asr was at 5 o'clock in the masjid. By the time you got back from school, it's 5:30, right? And then father and son at home, they should at least do their own Jamaat at home. It's not that the son reading his own namaz and his reading, dad's reading downstairs. And at least if there's two of you should still do Jamaat at home. Make a habit of reading namaz with Jamaat. If you can't make it to the masjid, at least try to make the habit at home with your children, with you, if your brother might be with you, your father might be with you, whoever you are. Then at least still try to make the habit of reading namaz with Jamaat at home as well. When you walk to the mosque, walk with tranquility and do not rush. The ulama wrote that it's makruh to run to the mosque. A lot of people, they run to the mosque. Ulama wrote that it's makruh to run towards the Jamaat. You should walk with adab, you should walk with respect, i.e., why would you be running in the first place? Because you left late. So leave on time. And don't be like me last minute every day. Right? Try to leave on time, get your routine. And this is where self-discipline comes in. The way you try to fix your own routine and try to be on time and pray your sunnah at home. This is not only for Salatul Fajr. Generally, the ulama in our mosques has become a routine that, for example, we just read Isha now. And most people, they read the 4 Sultan, 4 Fard, 2 Sunnah, 2 Fatrawita, 2 Nafal. They read everything in the mosque and went home. The reason why people do that and the imams don't say, oh, that's against the sunnah, is because most likely the way we live is when we go outside or when we get home, we get lazy. So most likely we might not do it in the first place. So the ulama say that at least you're finishing them off in the mosque, pray them in the mosque and go. But if you know 100% you're going to do it at home, then the sunnah would be that you go read the rest of your namaz at home. But if you think that, I'm going to get home, I might start watching telly, I might get relaxed, I might go to bed, or, I might end up doing something else, then it's better for you to finish it off in the masjid and then go home. But keep in mind the sunnah is actually to read the sunnahs at home, but not in the masjid. And then he mentions a dua here that you should read the dua when you're going to the masjid. Allahumma inni as'aluka bihaqqi sa'ilina alayka wa bihaqqi raghibina ilayka. So this is the long dua that Imam Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala has quoted. Like I mentioned previously with other du'as as well. Most of us can't memorize the du'as. We just about memorize 1-2 surahs from Quran. So you read the translation of the du'as, at least keep the translation in your mind. Like I mentioned the du'as about wudu, for example. Ya Allahumma a'tidin kitabi bi yamini wa hasib bi hisabi yasira. Allahumma bayyid wajhi. Now when I know the Arabic, for example, so when I'm reading this, I'm actually know what I'm saying. Oh Allah, whiten my face, the day face will be black and white. Oh Allah, give me shade under your throne, there's no shade but yours. Oh Allah, help me to listen to speak with benefit. Oh Allah, help me to save my neck on the day of judgment. Oh, when I wash my feet, oh Allah, save me on the Pul Sirat, on the bridge on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Save my feet from slipping on the bridge. When I read the Arabic, I know what I'm saying, so I feel what I'm saying. But if you learn the Arabic but you still don't know what you're saying, then you defeat the purpose as well. Now you're reading all these du'as, but you still don't know what's going on. So the best would be for you to have the attachment to even think of in English. So when you're rinsing your mouth, you're thinking, oh Allah, give me the ability to use my mouth to do your zikr, to read the Quran, to remember you. When you're rinsing your nose, the dua is, oh Allah, help me to smell the fragrance of Jannah, not the odors of hellfire. So now when you're rinsing your nose, you're just reminding yourself, oh Allah, grant me to smell the Jannah with this nose. Washing your face, oh Allah, make my face white. On the day face will be black and white. Even if you're thinking this in English, just try this in English as well, yeah? The du'as or anything associated with your wudu. Try to do wudu like this. And you know, I had one of the brothers when we went through this, he said, when I've done a wudu like this, I had a total different experience of the wudu itself. Because why Imam Ghazali mentions as well, that the ibadat doesn't start when you read it, you do Allahu Akbar. That's not when your namaz started. Your namaz actually starts when Rizwan was texting Awais in the morning today at 6 o'clock and he's saying, wake up for Fajr namaz. And then I seen Awais, alhamdulillah, coming for his Fajr namaz in the morning. So when you wake up, you make the intention to get out of your house to read the namaz, that's when your namaz has started. That's when your ibadat. So when you switch off your alarm and as soon as you step out of your bed, that's when your namaz, reward for your Fajr namaz has started. So when you're doing wudu, that's the worship of Allah. Don't do the wudu like we do the wudu, we just getting overdone with it, I need to quickly read my namaz. No. Consider that this is part of my namaz. I'm presenting myself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the most beautiful way. I'm going to smile nice. You know, we've got half an hour left for Fajr to finish. Right? 20 minutes left for Jamaat. You know, put some perfume on, put some itar on the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Adorn yourself for the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Take it as, you know, if you were going, for the youngsters, if you're going for a rishta, right, then I'm sure you'll go presentable. If you're going to a wedding, you go presentable. You don't go in a way that you don't smell nice, you don't look good, and you know, half your buttons are open and your one sock is on and one is off, and you walk in the mosque and I'm trying to put your socks on. Right? You won't do that when you go to meet someone else, right? You won't go to a wedding like that, you go fully prepared. Weddings at 6 o'clock, you wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning, go get a fresh haircut. We do all this tiyari for worldly things. But when it comes to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, last minute we're trying to do wudu, last minute, you know, we don't want to brush our teeth, doesn't matter, I couldn't read namaz, doesn't matter, my breath smells, I just had roti. That actually happens. And why? Because we're not reminding ourselves that it's not only about reading the namaz, it's how we present ourselves to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe just your efforts to prepare for the namaz, that could be the reason Allah accepts you in Jannah. Not the namaz itself. That you have shown to stand in front of me in the most respectful way. You prepared yourself, then you will put your itar on, and then you read namaz. As soon as you say Allahu Akbar, you start thinking about something, daydreaming. So your namaz, you really weren't even there, but you knew when you were preparing for the namaz, I'm going to worship Allah, I'm going to look nice, smell nice, wear nice clothes. You don't go to someone's house with messy clothes. But when it comes to namaz, it's alright. These clothes you do, Allahu Akbar. That's what normally happens to us. This is what Imam Ghazali is telling us not to do. And then he says, when you're making your way to the namaz, then make dua on the way. Oh Allah, make this easy for me. Put barakah in this. Whatever du'as come to your mind. Oh Allah, you know. And you can read the dua of Imam Ghazali and it'll give you some ideas that you can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for. Allah is not limited by language. Allah is not limited to hear your voice. You can just walk down the street and be thinking these things. Allah knows that is a dua as well. Yeah. So he mentioned, look, I have not left my house intending any ignorance or no seeking, showing off basically for people that I read my namaz. One thing is, there's two ways, like for example, you tell your friends that I came for Fajr namaz in the morning. And there's two ways to see this. One is you're showing off to them, I'm better than you, I did Fajr namaz. One is trying to say, come on, you come as well tomorrow. So the second one, you get reward for telling your friend. The first one, you lose your own reward as well. Because you're trying to show to him that I'm better than you, I'm going for Fajr namaz. What were you doing sleeping? Right? But the second one would be, come on, I went for Fajr, it's a nice feeling, it feels good, you feel fresh in the morning, and you should come as well. Now you're not showing off, you're trying to encourage him as well. So you get reward for coming and for giving invitation to other people as well. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants us all the tawfiq to do our amal on this, inshallah. Inshallah, we'll finish here. If you have any questions, let me know, inshallah. If not, then if you remember later as well about anything, then inshallah you just text me or phone me, inshallah. آمين اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين وصلى الله تعالى على حبيبه محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم